Okay, just take a good full breath with me right now. Inhale deeply. How did that feel? For a lot of us these days, that simple act can feel, well, surprisingly labored, maybe. Like we're not quite getting all the air we need. If that sounds familiar, you're definitely not alone.
Yeah, and what's really striking is that this isn't just a feeling you might be having personally. The data actually shows a very clear and frankly concerning trend. There's a measurable decline in lung capacity among modern adults, and it's something affecting people of all ages.
Absolutely. It's not just in our heads. This is actually happening. And it really seems to be the result of this sort of, well, almost relentless combination of factors hitting our respiratory systems from all directions. The air we breathe outside our increasingly inactive lives, even the air inside our own homes, like this constant pressure.
Exactly. It's like a perfect storm. And what we want to do in this deep dive is really get into the why behind this decline. And maybe more importantly, we want to connect the dots and show you how this trend might be impacting your own health, your well-being, in ways you might not even realize yet.
Okay, so let's start with some of the data then, because the numbers really do paint a stark picture. We're seeing, on average, something like a 10 to 15% drop in lung capacity in healthy adults just over the last 30 years. Now, that might not sound, earth-shattering at first glance, but
But if you really think about what that means for your body, that 10 to 15% reduction, it's basically like your lungs aging an extra 10 to 15 years. Just imagine that your respiratory system is essentially a decade, maybe even a decade and a half older than the rest of you. That's a significant acceleration in, well, how your lungs are working. It might mean, less stamina for things you enjoy, or maybe being more vulnerable to those coughs and colds going around.
wow. It's like our lungs are aging in fast forward. And it's almost a universal issue, too, isn't it? The World Health Organization tells us that, something like 99% of the global population is breathing air that doesn't meet their recommended pollution guidelines. 99%.
It really makes you wonder about what we've started to accept as just normal air, doesn't it? If almost everyone is constantly exposed to air that isn't technically clean, well, that just becomes our baseline. And the really concerning part is that we might be normalizing the long-term health effects without even realizing it.
And the impact on the younger generations seems particularly troubling. Children born today apparently have, on average, about 20% smaller lung capacity than kids born back in the 1960s. That's a huge difference right from the get-go.
Yeah, and what's really key there is that this kind of dramatic shift, it isn't down to genetics changing that fast. It can't be. The speed of this generational decline strongly suggests environmental factors, things happening during those really crucial early years when lungs are developing. They're basically starting life with a respiratory disadvantage.
And this isn't a trend that's slowing down either, right? The rate at which our lung capacity is declining seems to be actually speeding up. Changes we used to see happening over, say, decades are now maybe occurring in just a few short years. And it's affecting younger adults, too, people in their 20s and 30s.
Right. That acceleration is worrying. It suggests that the combined effect of all these things, the pollution, the inactivity, it's hitting us harder and earlier than maybe we thought. It's like the pressure is just intensifying.
Okay, so let's dive into one of the biggest pieces of that pressure.
Yeah.
Pollution. And you're saying it's not just the visible smog we used to picture. It's more these tiny invisible threats all around us.
Exactly. What's so insidious about a lot of modern pollution is its scale. It's microscopic. We're talking about particulate matter, like PM 2.5 particles smaller than 2.5 micrometers. I mean, to give you an idea, that's about 30 times smaller than the width of a human hair. They're just so tiny, they slip past our body's natural defenses incredibly easily.
Invisible, yeah. And yet they can do so much damage because they can bypass all our natural filters and travel straight into the deepest parts of our lungs. Is that right?
Precisely. These PM 2.5 particles can get deep into the alveoli, those tiny, delicate air sacs where the actual oxygen and carbon dioxide exchange happens. And once they're in there, they trigger inflammation, and alarmingly, they can even cross over into the bloodstream, which can lead to all sorts of wider health issues down the line.
And even though individual cars might be getting cleaner, greener, the sheer volume of traffic on our roads still creates a massive pollution problem, especially if you live near a busy street.
Yeah, if you look at how our cities are set up, the concentration of traffic in so many urban areas means a huge chunk of the population lives within, say, 500 meters of a major road. They're just constantly exposed to higher levels of these pollutants. It's like a persistent low-level attack on their respiratory system, day in, day out.
And industrial pollution, that's kind of shifted its form too, hasn't it? Maybe fewer classic smokestacks in some places, but new sources are popping up.
That's a good point. The nature of industrial emissions has definitely evolved. Some traditional heavy industries might have moved elsewhere, but we've seen increases from things like chemical manufacturing, refineries, and even, the huge energy demands of things like data centers. So it creates this complex, a kind of chemical cocktail, if you will, that we're constantly breathing in.
And then there's this growing threat. It feels almost apocalyptic sometimes, wildfire smoke. With climate change, it's becoming almost a regular thing for so many people, even those hundreds, sometimes thousands of miles away from the actual fire.
It really highlights how interconnected everything is, doesn't it? Wildfire smoke can travel huge distances, exposing massive populations to dangerous levels of particulate matter for, days or weeks on end. It's something many areas just didn't have to deal with historically, a stark reminder that air quality isn't just a local issue.
And even rural areas aren't totally safe, are they? Agricultural pollution is a factor too, maybe one we don't talk about as much.
That's right. Modern farming practices release quite a lot of substances like ammonia, pesticides, particulate matter into the air, which means that air quality in some rural areas can, at certain times, be as bad or even worse than in the cities.
Wow. It feels almost inescapable sometimes. Okay, let's shift gears a bit. Another major piece of this puzzle are increasingly sedentary lifestyles. It's such a dramatic change from how our bodies, and especially our lungs, evolved to function.
It's truly remarkable when you look at the numbers, the sheer scale of change in our daily movement. Historically, humans would regularly walk maybe 12 to 15 miles a day, just, as part of living. Today, the average is less than 3 miles. That's a profound drop in the physical demands we place on our bodies.
And it really is a use it or lose it situation for our lungs, isn't it? If we're not regularly challenging them, they just don't work as well.
Precisely. Without regular activity that forces us to breathe deeper and faster, the muscles involved in breathing, like your diaphragm, they weaken. And the lung tissue itself can lose some of its natural elasticity. Makes it harder to take that full, satisfying breath.
And our modern work environments, they certainly don't help. So many of us spend hours and hours just sitting, often hunched over desks or screens.
Yeah, connecting that to the physical side, prolonged sitting, especially if you're slouching, it physically compresses your chest cavity. That restriction stops the lungs from fully expanding. It leads to what some people call shallow breathing syndrome, where we're really only using a tiny fraction of our lung capacity.
And the big shift towards more remote work, while it has benefits, might have actually made this worse for many people. Less natural movement during the day.
That's a really critical point, actually. The sort of incidental activity we used to get commuting, walking around the office, going for lunch, that often just disappears in a remote setup. It can lead to even longer periods of being still and even less demand on our respiratory systems.
And then there's this weird thing called screen apnea, this unconscious habit of holding our breath or breathing really shallowly when we're focused on screens.
Yeah, it's fascinating and a bit worrying. What happens is, when we're really engrossed in a screen, work, or fun, the intense focus seems to trigger a subtle shift in our nervous system, leads to these periods of restricted breathing. And we can do it for ages without even noticing, basically training our bodies to breathe inefficiently.
And it's not just the lack of physical activity, right? Chronic stress, just the stress of modern life, also plays a big role in how we breathe.
That's absolutely right. Chronic stress triggers a physiological fight-or-flight type response, and that often includes rapid, shallow breathing. If that goes on long enough, it can become our body's default breathing pattern, further limiting our lung capacity and just overall respiratory efficiency.
Man, it really feels like our lungs are under pressure from the outside and being kind of neglected from the inside. And then we get to the air inside our homes. You'd think that would be our safe space, but often it's even more polluted than the air outside.
It's surprising, but the data shows indoor air can be anywhere from 2 to even 5 times more polluted than outdoor air. And considering we spend, around 87% of our time indoors on average, that's a huge and often overlooked health risk.
And a big reason for that is our energy-efficient homes and buildings. They're so well sealed, they just trap everything inside.
Exactly. Energy efficiency is good, of course, but the unintended side effect of these really airtight buildings is less natural air exchange. So pollutants don't get diluted or removed as easily. They just build up over time.
And you get this whole soup of volatile organic compounds, VOCs, being released from, everything. Furniture, carpets, cleaning stuff, the list goes on.
It's amazing how many everyday items release these VOCs. Things like new furniture, paint, cleaning products. And these chemicals can off-gas for months, even years. Prolonged exposure, even at low levels, can irritate the airways and potentially cause longer-term issues.
And then there's mold. Seems like it loves these modern, well-insulated homes, especially if there's any dampness.
Mold growth is definitely a significant concern in these airtight places, especially bathrooms, kitchens, anywhere moisture can gather. Even small amounts can release spores that trigger allergies, asthma, all sorts of respiratory problems. In some cases, even more severe lung damage.
And even the things we use to clean our homes, like many standard cleaning products, can actually be adding to the air quality problem.
Yes, many common cleaners contain pretty harsh chemicals that can irritate, even damage, the delicate lining of our airways. That clean smell we often associate with them. Often, that's just the smell of volatile chemicals being released into the air we breathe.
And something as simple as cooking, especially on a gas stove, can release a surprising amount of pollution right into our kitchen air.
Yeah, research shows cooking with gas can release nitrogen dioxide and other pollutants indoors, sometimes reaching levels that would actually be illegal if measured outside.
And even our heating and cooling systems, our HVAC, which should help, can sometimes make things worse if they're not looked after properly.
That's right. Dirty filters, poorly maintained ductwork. They can become breeding grounds for mold, bacteria, dust mites, other allergens. And then the system just circulates all that stuff throughout your home or office.
It really does feel like our lungs are just under this constant multi-front attack. So physically, what's actually happening inside our bodies when we're exposed to all this? What's the physiology of this decline?
Okay, so to really get it, it helps to picture the lungs. Inside, they have hundreds of millions, about 300 million of these tiny air sacs called alveoli. That's where the vital gas exchange happens. Oxygen gets into your blood, CO2 comes out. Think of them like microscopic balloons with incredibly thin walls.
Oh, and pollutants get into these delicate little sacs. That's where the trouble starts, right?
Exactly. These inhaled pollutants, especially the tiny particles, trigger an inflammatory response. Your body tries to fight back, but with chronic day-after-day exposure, this inflammation becomes persistent. It doesn't switch off. And over time, this chronic inflammation leads to scarring and a thickening of the walls of those alveoli.
Which makes it harder for oxygen to get through efficiently into our bloodstream.
Precisely. Those thickened, scarred walls just aren't as good at transferring oxygen. Plus, the lung tissue itself loses some of its natural springiness, its elasticity. Think of an old rubber band that doesn't snap back well. That's kind of what happens. Makes it physically harder for your lungs to fully expand and contract. And that contributes to that feeling of breathlessness.
And we also have those tiny hair-like things, the cilia. They're meant to sweep stuff out, keep the airways clear. Pollution messes with them too.
Absolutely. The cilia are like tiny brooms constantly working to clear mucus and trapped particles out of our airways. Pollutants can damage them, even paralyze them. So mucus and contaminants build up, which increases the risk of infections and just causes more inflammation. It's a vicious cycle.
And, like we talked about earlier, being sedentary weakens the actual muscles we need to breathe properly.
Yeah, the diaphragm, that big muscle under your lungs. It's our main breathing muscle. It weakens from lack of regular deep use. Same goes for the accessory muscles in our chest and back. They become less effective. It's like any muscle, don't use it, you lose strength. Limits our ability to take those deep, full breaths.
And even just slouching over a desk for hours, that physically restricts our lungs too, doesn't it?
Yes, that poor posture literally compresses your rib cage. It reduces the physical space your lungs have to inflate fully, and over time, your body can kind of adapt to this shallow breathing pattern, which unfortunately can lead to a permanent decrease in your overall lung capacity.
Wow. It paints a pretty concerning picture. And it feels especially worrying when you think about the impact on kids. Their lungs are still developing. They seem so much more vulnerable.
They really are. Children's developing respiratory systems are particularly susceptible. They breathe faster than adults, so they inhale more air and therefore more pollutants relative to their body size. Plus, they tend to spend more time playing outside, which, depending on the air quality, can mean higher exposure.
And sadly, some places where kids spend a lot of time, like schools, can actually contribute to the problem sometimes.
Yeah, unfortunately, many schools are located near busy roads, exposing kids to higher levels of traffic fumes. And often, ventilation systems in schools aren't great, which can trap indoor pollutants like dust, mold, maybe fumes from cleaning products or building materials.
And the huge increase we've seen in childhood asthma rates doubling since 1980, Roughly, that seems strongly linked to these environmental issues.
Well, while genetics can play a role in asthma, the sheer speed and scale of that increase over just a few decades strongly suggests environment is the main driver. Air pollution, exposure to indoor allergens, these seem to be the primary factors behind that really concerning trend.
And you put it all together, kids being less active outdoors, spending more time inside on screens, breathing in these indoor pollutants, it feels like a really damaging mix for their respiratory health.
It really does create a sort of perfect storm for compromised lung development. Less outdoor activity means lungs aren't challenged and strengthened by exercise. More screen time often means more shallow breathing. And then constant exposure to indoor pollutants irritates and can damage their growing lung tissue.
And you have to wonder if the recent pandemic, with all the remote learning and less physical activity, might have actually sped up some of these negative trends.
That's definitely a valid concern. Those extended periods many children spent learning from home meant a big drop in normal physical activity levels, and potentially more exposure to whatever indoor air pollutants were in their homes. It could very well have lasting impacts on their respiratory development. We might not know the full extent for a while yet.
This isn't just about individual health, though, is it? There are also significant economic and social costs tied to this widespread decline in lung capacity.
Absolutely. The economic burden is already huge, and it's growing. Think about the healthcare costs treating more asthma, bronchitis, COPD, other respiratory illnesses. It's enormous and projected to climb as lung capacity continues to decline across the population.
And it also hits things like workplace productivity, maybe in ways we don't always connect directly.
Yeah, reduced lung capacity often leads to more fatigue, difficulty concentrating, maybe being more susceptible to getting sick. All of that can definitely drag down productivity. And when you scale that across a whole workforce, the cumulative economic impact is pretty significant.
And our healthcare systems must be feeling the strain. More ER visits, more demand for respiratory specialists.
That's right. The rising number of people with respiratory problems puts a major burden on healthcare infrastructure. Everything from emergency rooms to specialist clinics to the long-term management of chronic conditions.
And just on a personal level, it affects people's quality of life, right?
Yeah.
Making everyday things harder, impacting mental health, social connections.
The social implications are really profound. When simple things like walking upstairs or playing with grandkids become a struggle because you're short of breath, it can lead to people feeling isolated. They might avoid activities, withdraw socially. It can have a really significant negative impact on mental health and just overall enjoyment of life.
Okay, so it's a lot to take in, but thankfully it's not all doom and gloom, right? There are things we can do, steps we can take, individually and maybe as a community, to try and reclaim some respiratory health.
Absolutely, yes. While the challenges are definitely significant, there are proactive steps we can all take. We can mitigate some of the damage, maybe even work towards improving our lung health. Awareness and action are key.
Things like personal air quality monitors. They seem more common now, letting us actually see what we're breathing in our own space.
Yeah, those devices can be incredibly useful. They help you identify pollution hotspots, maybe high particulates outside at certain times, or VOCs building up inside your house. That knowledge empowers you to make better choices. Maybe you avoid strenuous outdoor exercise when pollution is high, or you know when to ventilate your home more.
And simple changes inside the home, like using good quality HEPA air purifiers, making sure HVAC systems are maintained properly.
Right. High-efficiency particulate air HEPA filters and purifiers can trap a really large percentage of airborne nasties. And regular HVAC maintenance, changing filters, cleaning ducts, that's crucial too for circulating cleaner air. And, when outdoor air quality allows, just opening windows for natural ventilation helps flush things out.
And we definitely can't ignore the power of exercise. Even just adding a bit more movement into our day can make a real difference.
Absolutely. Even modest increases in physical activity have a noticeable positive effect on lung function. Cardiovascular exercise, things that make you breathe deeper and faster, like brisk walking, swimming, cycling. They're particularly good for strengthening respiratory muscles and improving overall lung capacity.
And there are specific breathing exercises too, right? Techniques like deep diaphragmatic breathing, maybe yoga, tai chi, that can help retrain our bodies to breathe better.
Yes, those practices can definitely help. They focus on increasing lung volume, strengthening the breathing muscles, improving the overall efficiency of your respiratory system. It's about learning to use the full capacity of your lungs through controlled, deep breaths.
And it seems even diet can play a role. focusing on anti-inflammatory foods, staying hydrated.
Yeah, a diet rich in anti-inflammatory foods.
Mm.
Fruits, vegetables, healthy fats can help reduce overall inflammation in the body, which can benefit respiratory health. And staying well hydrated helps keep the mucus in your airways thin, making it easier for your body to clear out irritants and pollutants.
But, I mean, individual actions can only go so far, can't they?
Yeah.
We really need bigger changes, community-level, policy-level changes, to make a truly significant difference.
That's absolutely correct. Our personal efforts are vital, definitely. But tackling a widespread issue like this, it requires collective action, policy interventions at community, regional, even national levels.
Like better urban planning, prioritizing green spaces in cities, investing in good public transport instead of just more roads.
Exactly. Urban planning that creates and maintains green spaces helps naturally filter air pollutants. And investing in and encouraging the use of public transport, plus making cities more walkable and bike-friendly, reduces our reliance on private cars and all the emissions they produce.
And we probably need to look at building codes too, right? To really prioritize the quality of the air inside buildings.
Yeah, evolving building codes could make a big difference. Mandating better ventilation standards, maybe restricting materials known to release lots of VOCs, even requiring air quality testing in new builds. That could significantly improve the air we breathe indoors.
And schools, especially, need targeted support to protect kids' developing lungs.
Definitely. Things like upgrading air filtration systems in schools, maybe even considering school locations more carefully, away from major pollution sources where possible. And incorporating education about respiratory health into the curriculum. Those are crucial steps to safeguard children's health.
So where do we go from here? It feels like a really big challenge, but hopefully one we can actually tackle.
It is a significant public health challenge, no doubt. But the encouraging thing is that the main drivers, pollution, inactivity, indoor air, are largely environmental and behavioral. And that means, to a large extent, they are things we can actually influence and control.
And it really starts with just being aware, doesn't it? Aware that this decline isn't just normal aging, and the breathing issues we might feel aren't necessarily something we just have to put up with.
Raising public awareness is absolutely the critical first step. So many people might not realize their breathlessness or those nagging coughs could be linked to this bigger trend and the environmental factors driving it.
So it's about taking those individual steps where we can, but also collectively pushing for change in our communities, from our leaders.
That's exactly the path forward. We need both things. Individual responsibility, adopting healthier habits, managing our own environment where possible, and collective action advocating for cleaner air policies, healthier community designs, putting public health first.
It really hammers home the point that our lungs are working harder than ever in this modern world, constantly fighting against this multitude of threats.
They really are. Our respiratory systems face unprecedented challenges today. The combination of pervasive pollution, less physical activity, compromised indoor air, it makes their job so much harder than it was for past generations.
And this decline, it's not just some abstract number in a report. It's a widespread reality that's affecting how we live day to day.
Right. It's important to remember this isn't just about potential risks down the road. It's about the immediate impact on our energy levels right now, our ability to enjoy activities, our overall sense of well-being today.
But there is definitely hope, isn't there? Our bodies, our lungs especially, they have a pretty amazing capacity to heal and adapt as given the chance.
Yes, absolutely. There's definitely reason for optimism. Our lungs can recover significantly. They can improve if we provide them with a cleaner environment and the chance to get stronger through regular exercise and better breathing habits.
So making those informed choices about our environment, our lifestyle, even just how we consciously breathe, really is an investment. An investment in our long-term health, our ability to breathe easier for years to come.
Every informed choice adds up. Supporting clean air initiatives, choosing to walk instead of drive when possible, taking a few minutes for deep breathing. Each one is a step towards protecting and improving our respiratory health.
Yeah. In a world where truly clean air feels like it's becoming rarer, maybe more precious, every single breath we take really does matter. Let's all try to make each one count.